Let's talk about this lawsuit. It's a pretty significant story. Was filed by Brittany Abrahams, who was a writer with WWE from 2020 until April of 2022. She was hired on the SmackDown brand, and it is working. She is a Black woman, and that plays very significantly into this story. It's a civil suit that she has filed against WWE, Vince and Stephanie McMahon, and then writers Ryan Callahan, Chris Dunn, Jen Pepperman, Mike Heller, and Christine Lubrano, who's their SVP of Creative Writing Relations. They are listed on the suit, and she is making claims of discriminatory treatment, harassment, a hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and unlawful retaliation against the plaintiff due to her race, color, and gender, and does include a list of witnesses that saw several of these incidents that she alleges. So she left the company just after WrestleMania 38 last year in Dallas. And she cited several instances in the writer's room or dialogue among writers that she found to be problematic. One of them being verbiage that was written for Bianca Belair, that allegedly Bianca Belair took issue with multiple times that she did not want to say. And that was the line, don't make me take off my earrings and beat your ass. And then it was Abrahams bringing up that these are based upon cruel, ugly stereotypes of dark-skinned Black women, and that Abrahams emailed Ryan Callahan her concerns with this wording. There's other issues that were brought up here, one of which was an idea to put Reggie in drag while he was paired with Carmella, and this was discussed on a Slack channel that included the McMahons, Bruce Pritchard, Ed Koskey, the Apollo Crews character that we did see make it to air. And several of these that are, in some ways are mind-blowing, but in other ways you can not be as stunned that these ideas were thrown out there. Shane Thorne was going to have a hunting gimmick, and that it was pitched that a white Caucasian male wrestler with a hunting gimmick would hunt a Black male wrestler for fun, and that Shane Thorne would go and hunt Reggie. Quote, holding Reggie captive in cages was also discussed. And then the other story involving a love triangle between Mansoor, Aaliyah, and Angel Garza, where Mansoor would have a deep, dark secret. And when they were throwing out ideas, what could this secret be? One of the writers threw out a joke that perhaps Mansoor could be behind the 9/11 attacks, and that is the secret that he has been holding all these years.
Right.
That would be quite the secret to have held on to for all these years, and then admitted on national television as well. And that pitch was met with nervous laughter by one of the witnesses here, also a Black woman that was on the team as well. So, it's highlighting a lot of offensive stories, some of which, in the case of Apollo Crews, that's an interesting one because we debated it at the time of whether this was going to be a character that Apollo Crews was embracing, if it was going to work for him, that you are drawing upon his lineage. I think a lot of this comes down to the buy-in of the performer himself and what kind of, is this something that he is pushing for? Is this something that he is doing against his will? How does the performer feel about it? I can't say I watched that character. I'm also not Nigerian and felt like it was, I can certainly see with the way that they presented him with the spear and such that got into territory that was uncomfortable for some. I guess it was the accent itself and the idea that went into the character was sort of up for your interpretation, and it was panned by some, but embraced by others.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know how Apollo Crews felt about it. I also ultimately, I think we should focus on what exactly the lawsuit is about. She's suing for wrongful dismissal. Is that correct?
Right. So the issue that came out at the end is that essentially is what she is saying is that she brought up her concerns with many of these issues and sort of speaking to the culture that she absorbed during her year and a half that she was with the company. And then at WrestleMania 38, they have the collectible chairs that are there ringside, and several of the writers were going to take these chairs, and she ended up taking one, and then she was the one that was reprimanded over this, and she believed that she was the only one singled out and ended up being terminated April 7th, just days after WrestleMania, with the idea that all of these complaints, this was their out to cut ties with her over a pretty flimsy reason about taking a commemorative chair from WrestleMania. But it is going to force many to examine the makeup of the writer's room. When you are writing for many different ethnicities, when you are essentially putting words in the mouth of performers, and what kind of culture does exist here. This is, I think that's also something that has been brought up in all of this, is that these are all ideas that it was sort of, these people all felt comfortable throwing out these outrageous ideas. And let's be honest, you're reading these ideas. Are there any of these that you could imagine would have made it to television at some point in WWE's history? Like,
yeah,
of course, we could go through a laundry list of stuff that does. And when
we have lived through it, like
we have lived through all of this,
Muhammad Hassan,
like
Muhammad Hassan was in the news.
Go through like all of this.
Apollo Crews was a ninja like a year ago. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Or sorry. What Tozawa?
Akira Tozawa, who I mean is like very offensive character that was just sort of accepted. We can go through all of these, and that kind of comes down to like who is being written for and what is being encouraged. And are these outliers, these ideas, or is this sort of what has been developed in terms of like, these are ideas that are not only accepted, but encouraged?
Yeah. I mean, it completely puts a microscope on, I think, what we've kind of gotten used to with professional wrestling, specifically maybe WWE's version of professional wrestling, and how much it plays off of stereotypes, throughout its history. When you're talking about a company that's trying to maybe, become like a Marvel or become, I don't know, like something mainstream, that probably doesn't fly. And these sort of headlines and these sort of like ideas that are now kind of made public, that might have been discussed, whether jokingly or not, in the writer's room, are not going to fly whatsoever. And I think that's a great thing for professional wrestling. If this level of scrutiny is there that much more in the writer's room, then I think it makes it that much more difficult for, something like an Apollo Crews character to show up in the future, or Akira Tozawa showing up as a ninja again in the future, whether or not the performers themselves might have vouched for it. I think that the image that I think it presents for the company, I don't think is one that's necessarily positive. But again, that's all kind of besides the point. And well, it's part of the point, but that's not the central point here. The central point here is whether or not she can prove, this person, what's her name?
Brittany Abrahams.
Brittany Abrahams. Can she prove that she was dismissed for complaining about these things, and that she was wrongfully dismissed for, not just taking a chair, but for constantly complaining about these issues? Can she prove that? Does she have a paper trail? What's the argument?
I read the entire lawsuit today. It's about 39 pages. And, there are direct quotes in there. And I would imagine like she does have receipts for several of these. Now, some of these are in-person interactions that I think that's going to be harder to prove. And you are trying to prove motive here. If this is as clear cut as it is, she was let go after taking a chair, that certainly strengthens her argument that that's a pretty flimsy reasoning. Now, WWE is probably going to have their response to this, and I'm sure that these writers are going to have some kind of response to this as well. This is her experience in this company, and whether that culture exists or not, I mean, it's certainly that this paints a pretty brutal picture of some of these ideas. But I'm going back only several years ago to a card in Saudi Arabia where we had the Davari brothers coming in to represent Iran. Like, this is like, that's a horrendous idea that if you had just read about that, you would be horrified. Well, we saw that. So, I mean, the idea that these ideas get raised in private, should we be so stunned about it when we know the history of this? And just going back a few years, like, we don't have to go back 20 years. We can go back a few.
I don't think we have to go back far at all. I can probably, if we dug deep enough, like just even look back at the past 2 years and find plenty of things. I feel like it's really hard to argue that professional wrestling, especially WWE programming, is completely clean of like things that are going to be perceived as like racially offensive, or culturally offensive.
Or at the level that are going to be that the audience is expecting that either. Like I read in the lawsuit about you know, the idea of Aaliyah, the character, maintaining her agency with these males. And it's like, I don't know if this is the company that is necessarily putting that at the forefront. They have made many inroads when it comes to their presentation of female performers, but I don't know if this is the product that is internally like promoting this.
Yeah, and I think those things are important to discuss again because we are consumers of it, and especially in the mainstream, light when this company is being discussed by business outlets as much as it is today. It should probably take a deep look at itself and be a lot more careful about these sort of things, these sort of storylines. But getting back to the lawsuit, it's not the WWE, as distasteful as a lot of these gimmicks have been, as distasteful as maybe what the Davari brothers had to go through in Saudi Arabia. Those things aren't illegal. Those things aren't going to necessarily, make them have to pay Brittany Abrahams for whatever she's suing for. Can she prove that she was wrongfully dismissed? That's the key focus here.
Yeah, and you're right, and you keep bringing it back to that, and that is what she is being set out to do. And listen, I can certainly read some of these, and you can shake your head at them. I also look at like this is a creative environment, and you also need to have the certain space to have wild ideas that are going to be thrown out there. Now, I think there is a distinct line when you are going into utter racism, homophobia, transphobia. I think you certainly need to be able to draw those parameters. But again, this is a company that we have seen examples of lots of that make it onto screen. So what is the message that these writers are being informed of like what is being encouraged that my ideas are going to make it onto the screen? And that's going to be, I think, a very difficult argument to prove here. Like, yes, is this in bad taste? That's not what the case is going to be about, of whether this is in good or bad taste. It is going to be if she was singled out as a Black woman, that
for speaking up against her dissatisfaction with a lot of this potentially offensive creative. Yeah.
And there are witnesses listed here. I would think this is going to be a test of the Endeavor-owned WWE. I mean, the sale or the merger is not completed yet, but historically, and there have been some significant exceptions, WWE fights a lot of these suits. Now, is this one that they want to see a Rolodex of all these angles that have been on television and seeing that loop of Vince McMahon using the N-word? And do they want that constantly as this is the kind of story that, I mean, you can get traction from because of just the nature of it and how much footage is at your disposal to paint this company. And do they want that kind of light, or do they want this to just go away and find a quiet settlement to make this disappear? And internally, maybe they, have maybe a re-examination of the protocols of their writers. And I mean, maybe so, maybe not. But I don't think this is something they want to linger and have all of this attention on poor taste angles, because there are a lot of them they can go through and they're easily accessible.
Yeah. I maybe what's interesting for that discussion is how involved will Endeavor be? How involved would an Ari Emanuel be with a case like this? Or is Vince still in charge here? Because I think we all know how Vince would react to something like this. I feel like Vince would fight it, just for his own ego. But that's just speculation, of course. Are things different now though, because he has somebody overlooking him?
I mean, again, this merger is not complete, but even once it is, it's sort of Nick Khan is the president and Vince McMahon is on top of him. So ultimately, this would still be a Vince McMahon call of how combative you would want to be versus the perception of your company at a time when things are delicate. And I don't know if you want to just have this type of attention on your company, but I'm curious to see how much attention a suit like this gets.
After what Vince just managed to escape, I get the sense the man probably feels more bulletproof than he ever has. But hey, things are a little bit different now. So yeah, let's see what becomes of this.
Yes, she is seeking a trial and looking for damages as well. And we will see if it can make it that far. Do you feel that this is one that could go far, or is this one that
how much? I mean, how much money does Brittany Abrahams have to fight a WWE? That I think that's one of the big questions as well. I'm sensing this might not go that far. Is my sense at the moment.
Well, we will continue to follow this. She is being represented by the Cochran firm, which actually is connected to the late Johnny Cochran. So interesting to know, like, what, sometimes if you are, if a legal firm is taking them on and, it's contingency at the end of things, maybe she has the desire to go further, or maybe not. This is obviously, you go against the WWE, can be very, very costly. Another interesting aspect of it is, I mean, I was a little surprised to see some of the writers attached to it all. Like, what does this open up, for future, I guess, employees of the company? Are they making themselves liable to future lawsuits? What does it mean for other writers or employees of the company that have been fired in the past? If this becomes a successful lawsuit? I mean, think of the writers that have been through that company, like hundreds of writers over the last 20, 25 years, and imagine the ideas that have been thrown out there, the culture of the place. I mean, it can certainly, I focus a lot on this because it could certainly open up Pandora's box for many of these people to come forward and share their own stories, that I'm sure there are plenty of them. And I think that's a large reason why WWE does not want these writers leaving the company and then being able to speak about their experiences there. But I would certainly say for writers in the company of, when you're on a Slack channel, when you're communicating by email, and this goes for anybody, I would say, always treat your one-on-one communication with the idea that others could see this. And would you want this broadcast, or would you want this as part of the discovery of a lawsuit? And you should always have that in mind when you're sending emails and what you think is just tweeting between you. Or posting on a YouTube comment section, huh? It comes back. It comes back for all of you. Thursday, Way and I, we're going to do the only thing we know how to do, talk. It is coming up this Thursday. We're going to cover life, AI, Twitter, Elon, health, smoothies. We're coming at you hard. Smoothies, especially. Yeah, this is going to be a smoothie listen. Okay, Thursday for Cafe members. All that and more. Plus, we will be live Friday night at 10 Eastern after the draft. So 10 Eastern. Rampage is on at 5:30 on Friday. So TBD if we will have time to watch Rampage, but we will definitely have a thorough SmackDown review and night one of the draft.